listener production.
From the briefing team, this is The Beefing.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here. Welcome to The Beefing. Today's beef is between the AFL and homophobia. Let's get into it. The Australian Football League, or AFL, is one of Australia's most loved games, by myself included. But the game's history with homophobia has been back in the national spotlight once again, because in the past year and a half, there have been 6 publicised incidences of homophobia within the AFL, which we'll unpack in a moment. Firstly, though, to give you a bit of background, the AFL is Australia's most attended sport in the country, attracting 8.4 million fans in 2024, which is wildly impressive. Now, the sport was codified in Melbourne back in 1859, most notably by Tom Wills. And while the origins of the sport have previously been up for debate, the AFL have confirmed that one of the inspirations for the game was Margrook, a First Nations ball game. And considering the accusations and incidences of racism within the game against First Nation players, it's kind of ironic, but that's for another time. Now, back to it. In 2017, the AFLW formed, which is the women's professional comp, starting its 10th season this year with 18 clubs. But unlike AFLW, which has a large percentage of players that are part of the LGBTQI+ community, the AFL has only ever seen one player in its 130-year history come out as openly gay or bisexual, which statistically just doesn't add up. When you think about it, there are around 800 to 900 men who play in the elite AFL competition each year across 18 teams. And a recent Australian study found that about 15% of young people identify as something other than heterosexual, which means that in the AFL alone, statistically speaking, there would be over 100 players who would identify as gay or bisexual. And in August this year, former West Coast Eagles defender Mitch Brown came out, making him the first current or formerly openly bisexual male AFL player. And the fact that it's taken this long for a player to come out says a lot about the sport's culture.
I played in the AFL for 10 years for the West Coast Eagles, and I'm a bisexual man.
That's a really big thing to say.
Yeah.
Now, historically speaking, there has been a link between elite sports and homophobia, not just in the AFL. But this episode is just about footy and the game's recent history of incidences. So let's unpack some examples of homophobia in the past couple of years. In early 2024, during a pre-season match, North Melbourne coach Alistair Clarkson was fined $20,000 and given a suspended 2-match ban for allegedly using a homophobic slur in a practice match against St Kilda. In April 2024, Port Adelaide player Jeremy Finlayson was suspended for 3 matches for using a homophobic slur against a Bombers opponent. In May 2024, Gold Coast defender Will Powell was suspended for 5 games for directing a homophobic slur towards a Brisbane opponent. In July 2024, St Kilda's Lance Collard received a 6-game ban for directing homophobic slurs towards VFL opponents. And while he wasn't playing in an AFL game for those offences, he has played in 3 senior games since being drafted by St Kilda in 2023. But the ban ended any hope of him featuring in the AFL 2024 season. 2024 was not a great year for the AFL versus homophobia. And similarly, in July 2025, Sydney Swans draftee Riak Andrew was given a 5-game suspension for VFL and AFL matches after using a highly offensive homophobic slur towards a North Melbourne opponent in a VFL match. Which brings us to the latest publicised incident. In August 2025, Adelaide Crows star Isaac Rankin was suspended for 4 matches after using a homophobic slur against a Collingwood player, and he put out this apology video.
I want to start by saying how deeply sorry I am. Just for what I said, there was no excuse. It was wrong, and I take full responsibility. I'm disappointed in myself, and I know I've let a lot of people down. I want to apologise to anyone that I've hurt, offended. I understand that word is offensive, it's harmful, it's hurtful, and it has no place in our game or our society. I am in no way a victim, but by going away, it's given me the space to reflect and educate myself to understand the weight of my mistake. And I'm fully committed to bettering myself in that area.
Now, research shows that these publicised incidences are actually turning away young LGBTQI+ Aussies from AFL and community sport in general. And a study found that around the world, 87% of gay men are completely or partially in the closet while playing sports. And queerphobia in sport also affects women and gender diverse people. And while it may seem that there's a rise in queerphobia and homophobia, it's actually a good thing that we're seeing more reporting of it because it makes players, fans and organisations just like the AFL more aware of the severity of the problems and highlights what problematic behaviour looks like. But even though the AFL are trying to do the right thing and implement education into their programs for players, a lot of the players do not complete the modules as intended, according to one ABC Grandstand commentator, Corburn Middlemass, who claimed former players that he spoke with said a lot of the answers to those modules would get shared in WhatsApp groups, and then players would just click through to the end, put the answers in, and off they go. Like, come on, guys. But in saying that, this is not an easy task. The commentator says that essentially what we're trying to achieve is changing a place that's been a breeding ground for homophobia for around 100 years. But the AFL has acknowledged their issues of homophobia in the sport, implementing pride rounds and in 2014 signed a framework on national television to become a world leader in efforts to stop the pervasive homophobic language used at all levels of the game. Then in 2024, when the AFL's inaugural LGBTQI+ action plan document was released, CEO Andrew Dillon said that the game of AFL has not always been a safe space for LGBTQI+ people. But some experts say that since the 2014 commitment from the AFL to combat homophobia, they couldn't really point to anything the AFL had done to drive change in 11 years. So, for the moment, it looks like slapping players with fines and suspensions is the short-term solution. And while some clubs downplay incidences of homophobia, others, like Collingwood defender Darcy Moore, say the amount of on-field incidences over the last few years shows we do still have an issue, sparking calls for cultural change and targeted anti-homophobia work. But that's it for today's beefing on the AFL versus homophobia. We'll be dropping a new ep in your feed every Tuesday and Thursday, and you can watch the full beef on YouTube at The Briefing Podcast. But if you liked this episode, we'd love it if you could share it with someone else who you think might enjoy it as well. It's a really easy way you can support everything we do here at The Briefing. And you can send us a DM on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast to tell us what beef you want us to sink our teeth into next. Until then, I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.